Good evening and welcome back to another episode of The Longing, where today we are going to be continuing to read Homer's Iliad. So, let's get going. Hector chiding Paris. He said nor answered Priam's warlike son, when Helen thus with lowly grace begun. O generous brother, if the guilty dame that caused these woes deserve a sister's name, would heaven ere all these dreadful deeds were done, the day that showed me to the golden sun, had seen my death, why did not whirlwinds bear the fatal infant to the fowls of air? Why sunk I not beneath the whelming tide, and amidst the roarings of the waters died? Heaven filled up at all my ills, and I Heaven filled up all my ills, and I accursed, bore all and Paris of those ills the worst. Helen at least a braver spouse might claim, warmed with some virtue, some regard of fame. Now tired with toils thy fainting limbs recline, with toils sustained for Paris' sake and mine. The gods have linked our miserable doom, our present woe and infamy to come. Wide shall it spread and last through ages long, example sad and theme of future song. The chief replied, this time forbids to rest the Trojan bands by hostile fury pressed, demand their Hector and his arm require. The combat urges, and my soul's on fire. Urge thou thy knight to march where glory calls, and timely join me ere I leave the walls. Ere yet I mingle in the direful fray, my wife, my infant, claim a moment's stay. This day, perhaps the last that sees me here, demands a parting word, a tender tear. This day some god who hates our Trojan land may vanquish Hector by a Grecian hand. He said and passed with sad presaging heart, to seek his spouse, his soul's far dearer part. At home he sought her, but he sought in vain, she with one maid of all her menial train, had hence retired, and with her second joy, the young Astyanax, the hope of Troy. Pensive she stood on Ilion's ivory height, beheld the war, and sickened at the sight. There her sad eyes in vain her lord explore, or weep the wounds her bleeding country bore. But he who found not whom his soul desired, whose virtue charmed him as her beauty fired, stood in the gates and asked what way she bent, her parting step, if to the fane she went, where late the morning matrons made resort, or sought her sisters in the Trojan court. Not to the court, replied the attendant train, nor mixed with matrons to Minerva's fane. To Ilion's steepy tower she bent her way, to mark the fortunes of the doubtful day. Troy fled, she heard, before the Grecian sword. She heard and trembled for her absent lord. Distracted with surprise, she seemed to fly, fear on her cheek and sorrow in her eye. The nurse attended with her infant boy, the young Astyanax, the hope of Troy. Hector this heard, returned without delay. Swift through the town he trod his former way, through streets of palaces and walks of state, and met the mourner at the Scaean gate. With haste to meet him sprung the joyful fair, his blameless wife, Aeacian's wealthy heir. Sicilian Thebe great Aeacian swayed, and Hippoplacus's wide extended shade. The nurse stood near, in whose embraces pressed, his only hope hung smiling at her breast, whom each soft charm and early grace adorn, fair as the newborn star that gilds the morn. To this loved infant Hector gave the name Scamandrius, from Scamander's honoured stream. Astyanax the Trojans called the boy, from his great father the defence of Troy. Silent the warrior smiled, and pleased resigned to tender passions all his mighty mind. His beauteous princess cast a mournful look, hung on his hand, and then dejected spoke. Her bosom laboured with a boding sigh, and the big tear stood trembling in her eye. The meeting of Hector and Andromache. Too daring prince, whither dost thou run? Too forgetful of thy wife and son. And think'st thou not how wretched we shall be? A widow I, a helpless orphan he. For sure such courage length of life denies, and thou must fall thy virtues sacrifice. Greece in her single heroes strove in vain. Now hosts oppose thee, and thou must be slain. O grant me, gods, ere Hector meets his doom, all I can ask of heaven, an early tomb. So shall my days in one sad tenor run, and end with sorrows as they first begun. No parent now remains my griefs to share, no father's aid, no mother's tender care. The fierce Achilles wrapped our walls in fire, laid Thebe waste, and slew my warlike sire. His fate compassion in the victor bred. Stern as he was, he yet revered the dead. His radiant arms preserved from hostile spoil, and laid him decent on the funeral pile. Then raised a mountain where his bones were burned. The mountain nymphs the rural tomb adorned. Jove's sylvan daughters bade their elms bestow a barren shade, and in his honour grow. By the same arm my 7 brave brothers fell, in one sad day beheld the gates of hell. While the fat herds and snowy flocks they fed, amid their fields the hapless heroes bled. My mother lived to wear the victor's bands, the queen of Hippoplacia's sylvan lands. Redeemed too late, she scarce beheld again her pleasing empire and her native plain, when oppressed by life-consuming woe, she fell a victim to Diana's bow. Yet while my Hector still survives, I see my father, mother, brethren all in thee. Alas, my parents, brothers, kindred, all once more will perish if my Hector fall. Thy wife, thy infant in thy danger share. O prove a husband's and a father's care. That quarter most the skilful Greeks annoy, where yon wild fig trees join the wall of Troy. Thou from this tower defend the important post. There Agamemnon points his dreadful host. That pass Tydides Ajax strive to gain, and there the vengeful Spartan fires his train. Thrice our bold foes the fierce attack have given, or led by hopes, or dictated from heaven. Let others in the field their arms employ, but stay my Hector here, and guard his Troy. The chief replied, that post shall be my care, not that alone, but all the works of war. How would the sons of Troy in arms renowned, and Troy's proud dames whose garments sweep the ground, attaint the lustre of my former name, should Hector basely quit the field of fame? My early youth was bred to martial pains, my soul impels me to the embattled plains. Let me be foremost to defend the throne, and guard my father's glories, and my own. And with that, we come to the end of the episode. Quite nicely timed as well. So, I will say thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon or night, no matter what time of day it is. I hope you all have a wonderful one of it. And as always, we will be back tomorrow for more of The Longing. Goodbye.